Something new. Something different. Something entertaining. Something informative. Something creative. And something to listen to. You are listening to Something Cinematic. A show for moviegoers by a moviegoer. Something Cinematic begins right now. Welcome to Something Cinematic. I am Timdiana, enduring it in search for credit, and your host of the show. Now we continue our show with yet another special, and yet another superhero film. Now I can go on and on and on about how much I like comic book movies and how much I like superheroes, but I won't bore you with that. I thought it'd be fun to just get right into the subject matter, which is, of course, X-Men. This has been a franchise that has continued to grow over the years, and it's had some positives, and it's had some negatives. But now we come to the next film in the franchise, which is X-Men First Class, the prequel to everything. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a little bit, but I thought it'd be fun to go back and look at some of the stuff about the rest of the franchise, look at their positives, look at their negatives, and have just a fun old time. So without further ado, let's start everything off with the first two films, X-Men and X-Men 2, X-Men United. Now the thing about X-Men is that I like that theme behind the story, the idea of prejudice. And I like how that has continued to remain a very powerful and compelling element to the story of X-Men. And you can see that in the film of the first one and the second one. And it's still there with in the third one, but, that's the third one, and we'll get into that later. But let's talk about the first one and how it plays out. I think it plays out what you expect it would, how you would expect it would play out. It's it's effective. As I said, it is very effective, and I think it's a very powerful element to the story. So my hat is off for them for keeping the idea of X-Men true, and seeing how that continues to grow throughout time, and seeing how that progresses throughout the next couple of films. Now, the one thing that's great about X-Men is I like the cast of X-Men. You have the likes of Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman and Ian McKellen and Halle Berry and all kinds of people. And you got to see some shine. You got to see some newcomers, who haven't seen on screen before. They shined. We got to see the combination of Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, two Shakespearean trained actors, now joined together in one movie. And as I gotta say, it was a great casting choice, especially with, of course, Xavier, because, look at Patrick Stewart. Look at him. He basically screams Charles Xavier. He was made for this role. Of course, there's, Ian McKellen, who definitely defined the character of Magneto. Actually, I've got to say, I recently watched the 1995 film of Richard III with Ian McKellen, and when I went back and I watched X-Men, I got to say, I could see that he kept that, or he used the same energy he used in Richard III, and you could see it in Magneto. Now, I'm not saying they're similar characters, because there are quite some differences between Magneto and Richard III, but I could see that it was the energy that seemed very similar, and I think, in the end, it works. Actually, you want to know the one character in the first one that really bugs me, after going back and seeing it again? Sabretooth. Now, this might be because I know the comics well, or I enjoy the comics, and I know the stories behind the comics, so I know the character of Sabretooth, and I think it just bugs me that he's not that developed as he is in the comics. Now, I know it's the movie first, so you gotta have that and keep that in mind, but it just would have been so much nicer if they just developed that character, rather than him going, I'm Sabretooth, and I'm going around and looking menacing. I'm supposed to look menacing, but I'm just, there to be a brute. That's about it. Scream for me. I look feral. Yeah. Nah, ha ha ha. We'll talk a little bit more about Sabretooth later, but, as I said, that was just one of the things in the casting I didn't like, but overall, it's a great cast from the X-Men franchise, and especially with the first two films. And speaking of which, I think it's now time to talk about X-Men 2, X-Men United. I will say that this is my favorite film out of the franchise at the moment, because this could change. But anyway, yeah, it is my favorite. For one thing, it's a great continuation of the first one. There's no big gap between 1 and 2, so there's you don't feel like something's left out, or things have changed drastically. Things have changed. There are certain, things that have happened between 1 and 2, but it doesn't feel like you're completely left out. So it's a great continuation from 1 and 2, and that's always good to have. And what another thing I like about X-Men 2? I like how they made everything bigger. Everything was just, all the stakes were higher. Like the fact that most of the movie, actually, I don't know why I'm saying most of the movie, it's all the movie. All the movie is having the X-Men basically on the run. They have, I'm going to say Weapon X, because that's basically what it is. Weapon X after them, with William Stryker after them, and trying to, get rid of all mutants. And I think I have said this before in the past. I like movies with people on the run, and I think it's just an intense story. It keeps people on the edge of their seat, what's going to happen to these characters and how they're going to survive. And I also like how we got to see, the team up between the X-Men and Magneto. It's something you've seen before in the comics, but now you get to see it on screen, how that played out. And once again, the casting is really good, really well done. I like Alan Cummings as Nightcrawler. I did like Kelly Hu as Lady Deathstrike, but like Sabretooth, she's just a throwaway character. She's just there to be, an enemy for Wolverine to fight, not really an enemy for Wolverine to be an enemy towards. That's what I feel like. It's like they're just there for Wolverine to fight. And it would be much better if they actually went by the comics and actually had stories between these relationships between Wolverine and Sabretooth and Lady Deathstrike. But no, we get a fight scene. That's it. Which isn't bad, because it's actually a rather good fight scene. But still, just a fight scene. Nothing more. bottom line, when it comes to X-Men 2, I really have no big complaints about it, because, as I said, it is my favorite out of the franchise, and it was a great continuation, and it just made the film story of X-Men that much bigger and that much great. Then came the third one.